Thanks, Jamie. And morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I guess to start with, I mean, Jamie's done the introduction, but my name's Sarah. My preferred pronouns are she and her. And I'm here from the University of Worcester, where I work in the Hive in library services. So I'm here to talk a little bit about study skills, about what they mean, about what you can do about yours, to make you think a little bit more deeply about them, because it's something that I think we all think is really simple and straightforward, and we know what it means. And actually what I'm going to do is make you think quite hard about it, and whether you really kind of have a good handle on it. As Jamie has said, do feel free to put any questions or comments in the chat box as we're going along. I will also be keeping an eye on that as we go. So to start with, I think I should probably start by saying there aren't any quick fixes to this. I can't magically tell you something that will mean you're just amazing at study skills just like that. There are no kind of study skills hacks. Well, maybe there are, but there's nothing really quick fixy for you. So that's in despite of my slightly clickbaity title about, you know, study skills, top 10 study skills for successful students. If you are interested, though, if you Google top 10 study skills for successful students, there's plenty of stuff out there that you can find if that's the kind of content you're actually really looking for. But what hopefully you'll get out of today, as I've said, is this sort of just thinking about what this really means, a bit more of an understanding around some of the ideas behind study skills, study habits, learning strategies, those sorts of things. And I promise I will give you some practical stuff at the end as well, so it won't just all be making you think and making it difficult. There will be some practical things we can do at the end. However, I should note that I don't like it to just be me talking. That's incredibly boring when we're all on screens all the time. I do like a little bit of audience interaction. Not going to put anyone on the spot, and you've all got your microphones and your cameras turned off anyway. So I will be encouraging you to use the chat as we go along. And I'm going to just try a bit of polling as well. So I just want to check. My first poll is, who's thinking of university study? Are you thinking of university study? Let's see if this works, because I've not tried polls before. So hopefully you should all see a poll sitting in front of you, and you can tell me whether you're thinking of going to university or not. Few yeses, few no's. Most people haven't responded yet. Okay, we're still chugging down the results. So it's pretty split there. But of course, if you're thinking of going to university, that doesn't matter. Study skills still relevant for you today. Everything that I'm saying will translate across to what you're doing now, or perhaps if you are, I don't know, perhaps supporting another student rather than the student yourself, this stuff will all apply. So it's sort of still all relevant regardless of whether you're going to university or not. Right, end that poll. So my first question is, what are study skills exactly? And you might be thinking, well, this is a blindingly obvious question. You know, what are you talking about, Sarah? Why are you even asking what study skills are? We know this. Do we? That's my first question. So I'm going to share with you to start what I've referred to as a deliberate provocation. And what I want to do with this is illustrate that maybe it's not all that simple, or maybe there isn't that kind of universal definition that we think there is. And this quote, I've got it over a few slides, but it comes from an article shared on a higher education blog last week, I think it was, written by a couple of academics, and it really annoyed librarians and study skills professionals across the entire country, because these two academics said, well, if a student does well, it's not because they've got good study skills, it's because they know their subject. And then they went on to say, well, if one of us were to write on this aspect of Nazi Germany, we could do it because that's our area of specialism. We would know how to write about that. And then they go on to say, but we couldn't write about the recent helicopter flight on Mars. We couldn't possibly do that because we don't know about that subject. And the idea that for someone to suggest to us that we could do the first because we had good study skills and we couldn't do the latter because we have poor study skills, well, that just seems preposterous to us. You can get the tone of the article. Pretty scathing stuff. And they finally wrapped up with saying, well, if students are struggling, they don't need more study skills help. That's not what they need. They need to know more about the subject, the knowledge, the content. And that was very much their viewpoint. Now, you can probably tell from the way I'm sort of giving emphasis to this, you can probably tell what my viewpoint is, and the link is there should you ever want to go and follow it up, if you want to angry up the blood. But what I want to ask is, do you think they're right? Is it? I can't type and talk. Do you think they're right? Yes or no? Do you think that this is that doing well is all about the subject? Your study skills don't matter? Or strong showing for no very quickly. So hopefully you can see that. So we've had 6 people say no, they're not right. 6 people haven't responded. So I'm going to take that as we're of one mind in our thoughts about this article. That's good. I'm very pleased by that, because otherwise the rest of this might be a bit tricky to share with you. So I've made a lot of assumptions in writing this lecture today, this presentation. So my assumptions have really been that you agree with me that study skills are a thing in their own right, and you've just kind of said that to me. You said, yes, actually these are something definite and separate from the subject that you're studying. And I'm also assuming that you agree that they're important, and I think that I'm assuming because you're here, that's probably the case, and you don't agree that it's just about the subject. So I think that means that between us we have some sort of intrinsic understanding and some sort of intrinsic agreement about them, about what they are, but can we actually articulate what that means? And again, I come back to my question, what do we mean by study skills? Now I'm just going to ask whether anyone feels brave enough to try and pop a definition of what they think study skills mean, or what sorts of things are study skills. If anyone wants to try and pop anything in the chat. And I'm just going to give you a couple of moments, give people the opportunity to type things down, collect your thoughts. And I should say there's no right answers, there's no wrong answers. I mean, unless you tell me that ice skating is study skills, that's probably not going to be a right answer. And here we see the challenge in online teaching, because I don't know if any of you are typing and I need to give you the space to do it. But you could all just be sitting here staring at the screen going, come on, Sarah, carry on. Lovely, thank you, Helen. Focus, organisation and time. Absolutely. Key component of study skills for sure. Another vote for time management there. Thank you, Paula. Okay, so I would say these are aspects or components of study skills, perhaps not an overarching definition. Ethan, knowing when to study and when to play. Oh yes, that's such a good point. Thank you, Ethan. There's definitely a balance to be had, and making sure that we're looking after our mental and physical health as much as actually working on study skills and working on our subjects. So we're going to come back to this. Here we go. Various general skills that can help you with studying your subjects. Yeah, absolutely, Charlie. Very much against what those academics in that article were saying, where it's just all about the subject. And actually, just going back to those academics, I've definitely seen lecturers who know all about their subject, but absolutely cannot present well on it. Oh, and more coming in, Mandy. Thank you. Finding, understanding, and evaluating information. Yeah, absolutely, another key component. So just to say, a lot of people have written an awful lot about study skills. This is just a really quick ebook search I ran on the University of Worcester's library catalogue. You can see we have over 16,000 results coming back in there. You don't need to know that much about it. Just goes to show that actually there's a lot of people thinking about these, thinking about how they work, thinking about how they kind of work for you, and how they're best taught, and all those sorts of things. This one that's come up first on the screen there, the Study Skills Handbook by Stella, Cottrell. If you do ever want a bit of light reading on study skills, that's a really good one, really aimed at students, really accessible. So if you ever think, yeah, I could do with something, that's quite a nice place to start. Now, you can pick an absolute stack of definitions off Google. If you Google what are study skills, it'll throw up loads of definitions for you. I quite liked this one. Said study skills are learning strategies. And I think that's really helpful. So it picks up on some of the things you've been saying in the chat here. So about organising and processing information effectively, and managing our time effectively, ourselves, how and when we work. So coming back to that idea of how and when we, work and play, making notes, preparing for and taking exams. And I would say these are examples of study skills. They're not. It's not a full list. But the key bit for me here is this learning strategies. And I think this is what's important. It's what works for individuals. There isn't just a one size fits all, do this and you'll be fine approach. So for example, the way I take notes might be different to the way that you take notes. And also the way that I take notes, I find is different according to different times. So sometimes I'll be scribbling with my pen and my paper, and that's something that works for me. And sometimes, other times, I will be happily typing away on something like OneNote or Evernote. So, what works for you as an individual and at a particular time that you're doing something. And then lots of other online definitions that you find list lots of other specific skills. And again, I think it's worth thinking about, well, what do some of these actually mean? So a couple of you have mentioned time management and organisation, and yeah, I think that is absolutely key, really, really vital. But then things like critical thinking. Well, what is critical thinking? What does that actually mean? And again, I've got kind of an online, I've got a life example that I could give you. But does anyone kind of want to think about, try and give me a definition in the chat about what critical thinking what does that refer to? What makes thinking critical? Told you I was going to make you do some work today. Analysing. Thank you, Mike. Evaluating and making judgments on a piece of information. Yeah, nice one, Saskia. I mean, a really good life example is when when you're on Facebook or another social media. Oh, brilliant! It's got some great definitions coming in here. Making sense of what you read, applying it, being able to explain, being perceptive, picking up on points about information. Yeah, all of those things. Some examples going to be, you're on social media, you see something shared, and before you hit that share button yourself, you have a think about, what does this mean? Who's shared it? Why are they sharing it? What's the evidence that's underpinning this piece? And we see so much misinformation shared online now with thinking about things like immigration, perhaps, anti-vaxxing, all those sorts of hot topics. So much is shared that is not critically thought about before it is shared. And yeah, absolutely, Ethan, this is exactly the same. Being able to determine what's true or false depending on the information given, or your best judgment about what's true or false. Or how much you agree with something, perhaps. It might not be as clear-cut as true or false. It might be, well, where's the grey area in this and where do I sit? And that is as much a life skill as a study skill. That's something you can use throughout everything that you do in your day-to-day life. Then, moving on to some of these other things, these specific skills that we see listed. Well, taking effective notes. What are effective notes? As I've said, there are different ways we can take them. Are effective notes trying to write down absolutely every single thing that a lecturer tells you? Or are they perhaps trying to capture key questions, key topics, key references to other things that you need to go and read up on afterwards? What about things like, academic writing? What is that? And you can see what I'm trying to say to you here is all of these things are, you need to think about what they all actually are. An academic writing, for example, so that might be an essay, it might be a lab report, it might be a dissertation, it might be a reflective piece, by which I mean something where you think about what you are learning and kind of reflect on how you have implemented it or thought about it. And those are all going to share sort of certain features. Like they'll have a structure, they'll all use academic referencing being another study skill. You'll probably be writing sort of impersonally, so rather than I did this, it'd be this was done. And they'll differ according to the subject type, to the kind of assignment, etc. But that's that broad academic writing concept. And things like learning independently, we talk a lot about this at universities. We're creating independent learners, by which we mean we don't want you to just sort of kind of regurgitate the information you're given in lectures. We want you to go out and do that independent work. Coming back to your critical thinking, well, what's my view on this? What have I read and understood? And how do I interpret that? And how do I go about learning these things for myself? And then we've got things like managing stress. So you all told me that we think time management and stress, etc., are really important as part of the study skills piece. You know, some people I think would argue perhaps managing stress isn't, but I think probably it is. You know, if you think of it as a learning strategy, you're going to need to be able to manage your stress levels to be able to manage everything else. And then digital skills, I mean, I've given these a whole slide to themselves because that covers so much stuff. So people kind of think about this as separate almost, but actually I think it's really integral to all study skills. So it's stuff like knowing how to format a Word document when you're writing an assignment. It's stuff like being able to log onto your online library systems and search for information online. You know, it's even things like being able to use email appropriately. You know, how do you write an email to an academic tutor as opposed to one of your mates? It's a different way of thinking, a different way of studying. And what we've seen over the course of the last year is actually how problematic this whole area is. We've seen huge social inequities and injustice around digital. So if you think about it, you really need to have, you know, you need to be able to have the hardware, so something online, ideally more than a phone. You need to have the data, you know, you need to be able to get online, that connectivity. You need to have the skills to do it, you know, you need to be able to kind of work this system. So all of you folks here today are using the online chat, you're using the polls, you need to have those digital skills and the confidence to do that. And you need the appropriate study space. You need the space in which to be digital, in which to do your studying. And we've seen how complicated that is over the course of the last year. I'm sure you all know people who maybe don't have all of those things and have found it really difficult to study. So without the digital stuff, how do they do the broader study stuff? But kind of coming back to study skills more broadly, I think the problem is at universities, we're not always as good as we might be at telling students what we expect. Now, I don't mean that kind of every university and every academic, but I just think across the board, it's probably something we could do a little bit better at. We could be clear about what we're expecting. So, for example, my team, who are librarians, we did a piece of research a couple of years ago, and we were asking academics, so what do you think, what skills should students have at different points in their degree programs? You know, what do you expect of them, and also what, you know, how do you tell them about that? So we're going to do a bit of guessing now. So we're going to go with that first quote, and let me just get my polls back up. So, which level of study do you think these relate to? So is it first year undergrad, second year? I unfortunately have to type these in every time. Final year, postgrad. Because that first one, I expect students to be reasonably proficient. That question, what do you think that refers to? First year undergraduate, second year, final year, postgrad. Apparently no one wants to make a decision here. We've only got one vote. Oh, a couple of people are going for first year. It's an anonymous poll. I can't see if you're right or wrong. Okay, just a couple of people have voted for first year. Most people aren't voting. Poll won't let you respond. Thank you, Saskia. Poll not responding. Oh, thank you for letting me know, folks. let's end that poll. Let's try a new one for the second one. We'll see if that works any better. So first year, second year, final year, prep. Right, let's see if this one works any better. So this is for the second one. This student should know the difference. Hey, this poll is working better. That's lovely. Okay, so we've got a few people going first year or second year. Got one for final year at the moment. Second year is inching ahead. Ooh, second year is taking a bit of a lead. Okay, right, we've got a good spread of people voting there. So we've got first year 3 votes, second year 4 votes, final year 2 votes. No one has said postgrad. Okay, so I'm going to reveal both of those to you now. Those are both relating to first year undergraduate. So there's 2 different academics who've said 2 very different things about first years. The first one you might expect, reasonably proficient searching online, probably be able to find a book. The second one I think is quite a big ask for a first year undergraduate, to know the difference between a reference list and a bibliography. To be honest, I think I might be hard pushed to tell you the difference. How to use the library, how to analyse, how to be critical. So they're expecting quite a lot. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do, I'm just going to write 1, 2, 3 and postgrad in these results, so I'm not typing for quite so long. So that one, I would expect a publishable standard level of writing. What do we think? What does that relate to? Yeah, unsurprisingly, a lot of people are plumping for final year undergraduate or postgrad. A couple of people have said first year and second year. Okay. Right, so that's how we're looking there. So people are saying, yeah, we think final year postgrad. And I'm going to ask you the same question about the second one before I reveal these responses. So there's some students still appear not to know. Da, 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 da. A lot of people are going for second year at the moment, but a bit of a spread. Oh yes, right. Okay, most of the votes are in, so just to show those responses. So most of you have said we think second year. So for these 2, these relate both to final year undergraduate. So again, you can see quite big differences in how some of our academics are thinking. First one saying, well, actually, I think my final year assignments, they should be publishable. I would question that, but apparently that subject, that seemed appropriate. And then another subject, someone saying, well, actually, they still don't seem to know differences between peer-reviewed journals and magazines. Some still struggle to understand, etc. I can just see a comments popped in. I think the fact that we're so unsure says a lot about how ambiguous it can be. Yeah, absolutely. And that is kind of what I'm saying to you here today. And I think it's good to just start thinking about what it actually means, because it is ambiguous. But if you've got a sense of that ambiguity, that kind of helps you work out what you need to do for you. What are your study skills? What are your strategies? And that's going to help you do better, rather than me just going, I'll go and read this book on study skills. And you've probably guessed by now that I am asking you about, the 2 quotes that are on a slide are both from the same year. So let's try again. Hang on, let me just close that poll. There we go. Well, I can see there's a hand up. Let me just do this final poll, Ethan, and then we'll come to you. So this is for both of the quotes that are on this slide. What year of study do you reckon these relate to? And again, you can see there's quite a difference between how they're being thought about. Ah, misclick. Thank you, Ethan. Votes are coming in. People are a bit on the fence about this one, I think. Oh no, we're getting a very strong showing now. Okay, a lot of results coming in here. So most people have said, we think this is second year undergraduate. And at this point, you're on to me. Yes, these are indeed second year points. So they should be able to reference to a point. So someone's kind of going, yeah, they've developed some skills. And then someone else saying, well, you know, I think actually here they should be developing criticality. And this is a nice quote, I think, because it tells you a little bit about what they mean by criticality. So it's more than one source, contesting ideas. Now, I think that's really, really useful because it links back to what I was saying about being an independent learner. You know, we're not just saying this is what we've been told by a lecturer, or not, this is not what we've necessarily what we've read. It's okay, I've seen this idea and maybe there's a different take on it, and I think this about it because I've read X, Y, and Z, and I've synthesized stuff from other sources, you know, showing opposing sides of the argument perhaps. So I think that's a nice one. Referencing is expected to be perfect by now. Again, that's obviously a bit of difference between they should be able to reference to a point. So I think that the key thing to take from all of what I've just said is, again, means different things, but at different times in different subjects. So I think what we see here is that, you know, there's a whole bunch of stuff that is clearly study skills, right? Thinking back to my deliberate provocation at the beginning, there's some stuff we can clearly point to and go, yeah, this is study skills. And most academics recognize that there are specific skills you need, whether that's referencing, whether that's how you write, whether that's critical thinking. They recognize them as specific content and stuff that you need to know. But the expectations for how you do it are going to be different in different subjects, and they're going to be different at different stages. So when you get to university, everyone pretty much recognizes that you're kind of, you know, it's a step up and you're learning how to work at university, which is different to studying in college or in school or wherever you've been previously. So there's sort of that step up and kind of going, okay, I need to know about a referencing style that maybe I haven't done before, or I need to think about, you know, these different kinds of academic writing. And then again, when you go into your second year, when it starts to, you know, count towards your degree classification, there's again taking that slight step up in terms of how in depth you are. So someone's saying, well, you know, you need your referencing to be perfect by this stage. So basically, you find that your first year is going to be different to your final year, and they should be different. And there's a sort of a progression and how you sort of build up on that. So I've probably made all of this sound really, really complicated. And it's not meant to put you off. I hope I haven't confused you too much at this point. But as I was saying earlier, it's meant to make you think a little bit more deeply about what all these skills are, where you are with them, how they apply to your subject areas and stuff. And it also hopefully makes you think, so if a tutor says to you, well, you need to do, you know, you need to improve your study skills, what skills do they mean? What are they actually talking about? Is it, thanks, Mandy, good to know that it's not massively confusing. Are they talking about actually you're not finding enough information independently to inform what you're writing about? Or is it the style of the writing that you're doing? Or is it the referencing? Or is it that you're not just quite doing it to the right level? And it's also, I think, probably quite useful for you to reflect yourselves and go, well, okay, what am I doing? Maybe I'm great at planning, my time organisation, knowing when to work and when to play. Maybe you've got that nailed, but actually you're not so great at the structure of an assignment or something. So what can you or students that you know actually do? And I said I would leave you with a few sort of practical, actual things you can do. So I'm not just making you think, I'm going to give you some stuff you can go away with. Although it is massively complicated, as I've said, there are things you can do. There's ways to get yourself that good baseline that you can build on. So let's have a look at some of those. So top tip really here, I think, is actually working out what your tutors actually want. So I've said perhaps some academic tutors are not always as clear on this stuff with you as they should be about what they're actually looking for, but there will always be some really big clues for you in there that people don't use enough. There will be marking criteria that will tell you exactly what they're looking for. There will be things like module handbooks. They will probably have learning objectives in. So the learning objectives, they tell you exactly what you should be doing. What are you meant to be getting out of that module? And that's going to help you work out how to do well in your assignments, work out the study skills that you need. You know, if they say, well, we're looking for you to do a presentation, you know you're going to need some presentation skills. If it's kind of critically analyze two different texts and compare and contrast, well, you know you're going to need to start thinking about your critical analysis skills and how you interpret contrasting information and present it back. And this is stuff that people just don't look at as often as they ought to. There are loads of study skills websites. I don't know if you've got anything at Halesoe that you can use, but we've certainly got a study skills website at the University of Worcester. The URL is there. So there's loads of stuff there. And a lot of universities that you're planning to go to will have their own study skills websites. They will have sessions that you can sign up to. Make the most of those. There are a whole bunch of people at universities who can help you with this stuff, as well as your actual lecturers. And you know, even though I've said, you know, there are different strategies that you might be using, there's different stuff at different levels that's important. There's, you know, there's some stuff on these that works for everyone. You know, time management, referencing, the structure of an academic essay. These are basic things that you're going to need to know, however you study, the underpinnings really. And then use all that information to work out what works best for you. So I've said, you know, everyone does this stuff differently. So for example, you might want to draw your notes. I thought this was a really nice image of someone actually kind of drawing down what they were hearing in a lecture. And some people are brilliant at this. They just do beautifully doodled sort of notes that work well for them. Maybe you prefer to handwrite them, maybe you prefer to type them. And then, you know, there's a whole bunch of different things you can use as well with all sorts of different study skills. So, you know, you could use things like a speech to text tool to write your assignments. So, you know, if you've got a touch of RSI because you've been typing too often or maybe playing on the Xbox a bit much, you can actually have tools that will allow you to talk and it will write down what you're saying. Some people find that a really helpful way to think out what they're talking about. Some people, for example, will listen to a book rather than kind of sight reading it. I have a colleague with dyslexia, for example, who finds it incredibly helpful to use. There's a tool in Word that allows you to listen to the document at the same time as you're visually reading it. And she finds by doing that and having the sort of the visual and the audio at the same time, she finds she can understand the essays that she's marking a lot better. So again, that's something, you know, thinking about, well, what works for me? It's not just about reading, it's about how I'm reading. And then, you know, we've touched in the chat on some of this sort of mental health stuff about time management, about stress. You know, what can you do to help you with your mental and physical health? Because that's all going to impact on you studying. So, you know, there's the real basics like, you know, exercise, getting enough sleep, eating the right things. And, you know, I said you can find all those different definitions of study skills online. Some of them really focus on this mental and physical health aspect as study skills in their own right. And that's up to you whether you think about them as a study skill or not, but certainly they're really important to consider. And I've put here at Worcester, we have a Study Happy program run by the library, where we do all sorts of supportive things like we get the pets as therapy dogs in, we do a study happy hour with free tea and coffee and a bit of advice and support. Universities have counselling services and all sorts of things like that. So there's loads of stuff like that it's worth looking out for, because that can all impact. And to give you a really concrete example, you know, thinking about stuff like eating right and getting enough sleep, You know, I was writing this lecture last week, and I had one day where I just couldn't do it because I was so tired because I hadn't slept well. You know, that's a university assignment, then, you know, you're in a world of trouble, really. And then I think my sort of final comment before I wrap this up is, once you've learned your stuff, your study skills, use it in everything. Don't compartmentalize it. And by that I mean, don't just apply it to kind of one area. Apply it to everything you do across your degree or the courses you're doing now. The best example I have of this is, I had a colleague who used to teach on a study skills module in dentistry at Birmingham, University of Birmingham. And she would do a really detailed study skills thing, and she would mark the assignments, and students would do really well on their referencing and their information finding. And then they would go to another module where they would still need those skills, and they would just stop using them. And it was like they just thought the study skills stuff was for the study skills module and couldn't work out how it applied to everything they do. So just make sure you're using it across the board. And we see this sort of time and time again in universities. So I am going to wrap up there and turn it over to you guys for any questions or comments or thoughts you may have. Nothing coming through in the chat at the moment.
It's one of those interesting things, Sarah. Sometimes, yeah, sometimes they're starting to come through. I think when people have had a bit of time to digest and think, yeah. So the question there about, do you have any advice for anxiety around deadline time?
Oh, that's always a good question, isn't it? I think it's quite natural to have that. What would be good advice for anxiety around deadline time? Tell you what, I'm going to throw that back out to the virtual room. Actually, what tactics and strategies have you all got for that anxiety? And I will come back to it. I'll answer some of those other questions and see if anyone kind of comes in with those anxiety recommendations. But I will circle back to it in a mo. Just to pick up on the other sort of perhaps slightly easier questions. Oh, it's such a good question about referencing, Mike. So our referencing policy is that it's the pedagogy that's important. So the learning and teaching principles that's important, not the have you got the full stops or the italics in the right place. So really, with referencing, the important things for me and for the university are, can someone else follow it? You know, can they find the thing you're referencing? Have you been consistent across your essay? You know, have you used the same style all the way through? And do you kind of understand when and why to do it? That should be what's important. We do recommend a particular version of Harvard to our students. You're absolutely right. There can be varying standards, even for one standard. So we do have one that we recommend. But honestly, every university does kind of do these things differently. But we absolutely have it enshrined in our policy at Worcester that it shouldn't be about, you know, your full stops and your italics. We've got one recommendation about the anxiety around deadline time. Yep, it's working in chunks, take time out. I mean, I think that is probably the best piece of advice of all, is to just try and approach things well in advance of that deadline. The absolute best thing I think you can do is to try and complete the piece of work before the deadline, you know, whether it's a few days before or even just a couple of days. Give yourself time and space away from that piece of work, and then come back to it with fresh eyes. That's always really, really helpful, I think. I also think kind of peer support is really good. If you can possibly bear to swap your assignments with a friend and kind of get each other's feedback, that can take out some of that anxiety. If someone else has read it and gone, no, that makes sense to me, I understand what you're getting at, some really good ideas. You do have to be a little bit careful in doing that you don't then pinch each other's ideas, because you can get yourselves in trouble with plagiarism and things. So do be mindful of that. And yeah, finding your organizational systems that work for you. I would say. So my life is organised wholly by an online to-do list called Trello, which I have on my phone and on my desktop and everywhere. And that's how I organise my time. Obviously, it's slightly different because I'm not studying, but it's still what keeps me knowing when to do different things. Just going to see what other questions we've got here. Any specific ideas on helping students compare sources? Yes, so I think probably the URL that I've shared with you, in fact I'm just going to put it in the chat now, is really helpful because we've got loads of useful study skills advice on our study skills website at the university. So I've just popped that in there for you. We do have some pages on evaluating sources. So it's things like thinking about, well, who's written it, when was it written, what's their bias or their aim. You know, if it's two kind of academic sources, then probably you don't have so much necessary. You'll still have comparison of ideas, but it's sort of in that slightly more academic intellectual realm. But if you're comparing something like a journal article by a scientist and then something from, I don't know, Greenpeace, say, Greenpeace are obviously going to have a very particular agenda. So thinking about, well, what are they trying to do with this information, to kind of help you think about comparing the ideas that are in there. Oh, we've had another good one coming through here about the anxiety question. So try to have a plan, cut it up in structures, small achievable chunks. Yeah, brilliant ideas. Really, really practical. What else have we got? How did I get to become a university librarian? Yeah, no, I'm happy to answer that. I was doing a PhD at the University of Birmingham. I was doing my PhD part-time, and I happened to get a job in the library to sort of pay my way. Simple as that. And I ended up where I am now. Found that was probably a better career choice for me than working as an academic, but still working in a university. Another question here from Ethan. When we're in a lecture, what's the best way to take notes? Online, paper, or other? So this very much comes down to, I think, what works for you. Personally, I tend to prefer online, but it's kind of just working out what works for you. If you're doing it online, are you just going to get distracted and end up on social media? Because if that's the case, probably online's not going to be the way for you. If you can't keep up when you're writing, then maybe online is better. I think it really, really is important. Advice on note-taking lectures, keeping up with the speaker, the sheer volume, back-to-back lectures. Yep, definitely. So I think, you know, remember when you're in a lecture, you're not trying to write down every single thing that comes out their mouth. You're trying to pick up on some of the key points, the key themes. Certainly at university, what you'll find is most of the slides that are presented in lectures will be shared afterwards, so on Blackboard or something like that. And a lot of universities now are doing lecture capture as well. So the lectures are actually recorded, which means you can dip back in afterwards. So when you're kind of revising or refreshing or thinking, yeah, I missed that bit or I didn't understand that bit, you can kind of go back and re-watch, and they're available to you. Not all universities do it, but a lot of them do. So that's a really useful resource, and it means you can kind of, when you're in the lecture, you can think a little bit more about just trying to focus on understanding what's going on, because I've made this mistake where you're so busy trying to write it down word for word that you're kind of missing the overall ideas that are being presented. Okay, I think I've answered all the questions that have come up, but if there's anything that I haven't answered and you'd like to, pharmacology, quite technical. Yes, I can imagine it is. A lot of tricky spelling as well. And again, lecture capture is really good where you've got those technical subjects, I think, because you can kind of go back and kind of go, what was that I just heard?
I think you're right, Sarah. I think it's just in like the questions of Oh, hang on, you got another question before we speak too soon?
Yes. A general policy of Worcester focusing the principal on the precise details. It is in our assessment policy. There's a section on referencing. That doesn't mean to say you can't, you can just do whatever you want with referencing. There are, you do need to be sort of following a style and following it consistently, but it is actually in our referencing policy, which is part of the assessment policy. And it does say, for example, if you pick the wrong kind of Harvard, you wouldn't be marked down for that. It would still, because it would still be, you're doing everything, you're referencing right, you're doing it, so long as you're consistent across the board, then that's fine. It just means that, some people get really, really caught up on, oh, you haven't put a comma after the date. Does that matter? Personally, I don't think it does.
Okay, so we'll sort of bring it to a close there. Thank you, Sarah. It's always interesting sort of listening to lectures on this sort of thing, because I think that very often what can come out is that people can almost be more anxious about kind of not necessarily the subject of what they're writing about, but kind of the whole thing about referencing and writing a bibliography, and especially with that, that kind of constant kind of, where's my punctuation going? Is it going before, after, in between? If I miss it out, is that a problem? That sort of thing. So I think it's good that those questions have been raised, and I think you're absolutely right. I think the main thing is kind of consistency. Do you know what I mean? Because I think that when it's consistent, at least it kind of flows. I think sometimes when you find yourself sort of switching, in terms of your consistency, that can almost become more confusing for the reader. So we hope that the audience has enjoyed today's session. I mean, obviously, if you'd like further information, about University Centre Halesowen, or studying higher education at Halesowen College or the University of Worcester, we've got our community hub assistant here, who is Lottie Summers. So her email is lsummers@halesowen.ac.uk. You'll also receive an email asking for feedback on today's session. So we'd love you to fill that in, and obviously you can be added to our mailing list so that we can send you information about any future lectures that we have. We've also recorded today's lecture, so what we'll do is we will send you a link, because sometimes I know that people can get the benefit of kind of watching it back through to pick up any bits they might have missed. So our next lecture is in September, and obviously we'll keep you up to date with all our events on our website. And like I said, if you sign up to the UCH mailing list, you'll get those details as well. So again, just thank you so much, Sarah. Like I say, it's just really interesting talk, and so timely at this particular sort of function of the year, where kind of students are they're finishing off, and then very often some of the kind of anxiety and worry sort of kicks in about, oh crikey, I'm going to be starting sort of HE in September, October, and I think sometimes it's hard to know exactly what it's going to look like and feel like, that sort of thing. So thank you very much for that. I think you've definitely kind of put some sort of fears to bed. Okay, right. So with that, if you would like to leave the session, you can use the menu at the top left of your screen, and then leave session then appears at the bottom. Okay, so thank you all very much.